Greetings, folks. I'm Josh Williams here with the one and only
Fred Miner from Peregrine Safe and Ready.
Now, Fred, we are really starting to rattle off these shows here.
We are.
We're up to 15, episode 15.
Well, I thought you were going to tell me 15 viewers.
Oh, we might have 17.
Okay.
Right?
We'll take it.
So, for those of you watching for the first time, Fred here. What do you do, Fred? Tell me about Peregrine.
Peregrine Safe and Ready is a company I started to provide the area with personal defense training, with personal training for fitness, with nutrition counseling, and also doing security assessments on buildings and particularly residences, which, by the way, I'm actually going to be doing some work on a place out on Canisius Lake tomorrow because the residents had a break-in. And it turns out there were a string of those. There were actually 15 of them on West Lake Road here in the within the last week.
Sounds like a news story that I'm missing.
Possibly.
Thanks for that scoop, Fred.
Yeah. It got very, very little attention from local law enforcement. They reported it, and guys kind of shrugged their shoulders, say, yeah, that stuff happens. So I went out to the residence Sunday afternoon and took a quick look, and right off the bat, there were no deadbolts on the doors. And for people who don't know this, a screwdriver or even a credit card is all you usually need to get into a normal door, residential exterior door.
Well, thanks for telling people how to break into a house, for those that didn't
Actually,
know.
believe me, Josh, the ones who would do it, they already know.
They already know. That's
Yeah,
correct.
they know.
Good point. So we were talking, as we do before we go live here, about some of our topics that we could discuss.
Yeah.
And you're talking about breaking in and home security and that sort of thing. And I said the word doomsday.
Yeah, last week you just threw a little shot out there about, well, Fred's sort of a doomsday or something like that. So I thought maybe it would be appropriate for us to really kind of explain where I'm coming from in that scenario.
All right, give me the short version, Fred.
Well, the short version is going to be the hard part. See, as you know, we've talked about preparation for different things. We've talked about self-defense. We've talked about taking charge of your own health through diet and exercise, and stuff that pretty much we're on the same page on. My thought, though, is that I do see some things happening in America that I don't think America can pull out of. Ultimately, coming from the huge level of debt that we have, and just looking historically at what's happened in other countries that experience high levels of debt, and it never ends well.
So if the you-know-what, the proverbial you-know-what
Hits the fan.
hits the fan.
Let's take it best case to worst case.
There we go.
Okay. Best case, somebody comes along and says, oh crap, this is really bad. You know, we should have let those banks fail back in '08 because the bailout thing is just inflating the bubble even bigger. And maybe we can come up with a solution, and it's going to be a little tough, and we have some hard recovery time, but people pull together. And, you know, we've experienced things before with, and actually have been for the last few years with pretty high unemployment. We've had a deterioration, certainly, of manufacturing jobs in America.
Right.
A lot of people have been moved to part-time status, and this whole debacle with health care. And right now, a lot of people uninsured, underinsured, wondering if they're insured, that kind of stuff. I mean, that could get worse, but it could be eventually resolved. That's what I would consider to be a best case kind of scenario,
Okay.
Especially as you have alluded to before, we throw most of the bums out and kind of start fresh. I don't think any of that will actually happen. I really don't.
No.
People are stuck in something that I didn't coin this term, but it's called normalcy bias,
Okay.
where most of us really hope that tomorrow's going to be like yesterday. Okay, and people don't like change. I know we like the new iPhone when
Sounds
it
like
comes
my
out.
dating. That's like my dating life.
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot of levels that pertains. Really, let's not go down that rabbit trail. But that's how people are. But when in fact things change all the time. But there are certain things that are kind of inevitable. When you run up debt and just keep printing money, eventually we're going to see really major inflation. And I think we've seen the early tremors of that already. I go to the grocery store and I might not spend any more money, but I come home with less stuff. a lot of the packaging, if you'll notice, that used to be 16 ounces
Right.
is now 12 or 14 ounces. And no, there was no announcement of that. So it looks like the price is held, but in fact it hasn't.
Gotcha.
Gas is pretty expensive. When the current president took office, gas in New York was like $1.85 a gallon, and now it's $3.60.
Is a gallon still a gallon?
Maybe we ought to go check that too. I'm not sure.
Right.
But so worst case, and this is the one in the proverbial doomsday preppers and that silly Nat Geo show. Those guys are all worried about a specific event.
Right.
An EMP, electromagnetic pulse, the next on the power grid. Is it likely? No, but actually, either through a cyber crime or a high-level nuclear explosion or something, you could have a big disruption. And we are not guarded against that. In fact, there have been congressional reports that are saying how vulnerable our grid is. That would be horrible, but not the most likely. I think runaway inflation and some of the resulting problems. Right now, let me illustrate this. Okay, I told you I'm training to be an EMT.
Right.
One of the things they told us in one of the first sessions was, and we'll be done May 15th, but unfortunately, we can't schedule your finals, the state finals, because the state has not paid the testing agency, and they've stopped administering those finals. So the actual test and certification of my whole class there and others all over the state is up in the air because the state hasn't got the money, basically, to pay the testing agency. Never mind the state of the state address and everything's hunky-dory and tax-free zones, and you and I have both talked about some of the things wrong at the state level. Now, that will probably get resolved, but right now it's a shell game shuffling around money from one place to another, but everybody's in debt.
Sounds like my checkbook.
Everybody's in debt.
Right.
From personal level debt of Americans to the municipalities, the state, the nation. Somewhere along the line, you got to pay the bills. And the one that I fear the most is when they default on the food stamp cards. Right now it's a credit card. You go to the grocery store and they just swipe it through and they buy their groceries. I never go to the store anymore without getting in line behind somebody with one of those cards. And
that's a good point, actually.
At some point, it's very possible that the grocery stores will say, hey, the state didn't pay us last month. We can't honor those cards. What do you think will happen the day that happens?
Chaos.
Absolutely. We've seen before. We had that incident a couple months ago down in Louisiana where the EBIT cards were limitless for a couple hours.
Yeah, people went bonkers.
They went crazy, and it was near riots, and that was in the case that they could get anything they wanted. People were running $700-800 worth of groceries through the line, and luckily it got shut down quickly. What happens the day you tell all those people, oh, I'm sorry, we can't honor those cards? They're going to be angry. And if you don't believe that, go on YouTube and go back and look at the Rodney King riots in 1992.
Speaking of Rodney King riots, I was at East High School when that happened, and we had rioting in Rochester, and it was insane. I was the only, I went from Calamum to East High School, and there were a lot of white kids that went to class the next day, and I would say 99.9% of them had black eyes and bloody noses. And
it was just an excuse.
Oh, yeah.
Most of the people that join into riots do it because it's just a time of lawlessness. In fact, one of the things that happened during the King riots is there were a whole bunch of murders committed that were retribution murders. It was gang versus gang, drug dealer versus drug dealer. Had absolutely nothing to do with the police brutality on Rodney King.
Same thing in Katrina. A lot of those deaths that happened during Katrina were gang related. So
and they were just crimes of opportunity. I've talked to police officers before about what would happen if in fact the cards weren't honored, and without even blinking, guy who spent his career as a Rochester City cop and is now retired said, "Oh, the city burn it to the ground." It would be burned to the ground.
Well, I'm glad I'll be out in Livingston County, but I won't be for the next 90 days.
Yeah, you're going to be down in Texas, aren't you?
Texas. Don't mess with Texas. Isn't that the saying?
Yeah, and you don't mess with a military base either.
Right.
Normally, that's not a great idea. I don't think you have to worry much about rioting civilians on a military base.
Right. So I'll be down in Texas for 90 days. What we're going to do, I'm going to tech schools. We're going to have, who's in the studio right now, we're going to have Christian come in here. And Christian, you are going to go toe-to-toe. You ready for
He
this,
just
Christian?
doesn't look like a guy who'd want to like hurt me. You know, I think you're not giving him much credit, Josh.
So Christian's been doing a great job. He does Suncast, and he's really coming along nicely. He's a SUNY Geneseo student. So
I think it'll be fun.
So I'm excited about watching. I'll be tuning in from Texas to see that. And
will I get irate phone calls?
You might.
Maybe. Okay.
You might.
I'll be ready.
All right. So maybe we could get one of those screens like they do on ESPN and put me up in the back.
Oh yeah, that would be really cool.
I don't
take
think
your
you
camera
want
with
it,
you.
right? Yeah.
Okay.
So that's the game plan for this. But and we were I said that jokingly with the doomsday thing, and I'm learning all about part of this class is going to be cold weather extreme survival down in Texas. Yeah. Well, the cold weather survival school is up in Alaska.
Yeah.
But they do a little basic 101.
They can tell you to put your coat on, but if you do, you'll have heat stroke.
Put your arms in your armpit sort of stuff. It's day one.
Yeah.
So, but we'll wrap it up with this. When the proverbial you know what hits the fan, what's the first thing Fred Miner's going to do?
Kick back and watch. No, honestly, it would be a matter of gathering together with friends and family and just standing up for each other, just like we do now if something happens. That's my point to everybody is being prepared for an emergency is being a good neighbor. I drive around with a tow strap and jumper cables in my car. If I need them, they're there for me, but if somebody else needs them, they're there for them. I think small towns and local communities, neighborhoods tend to pull together. You mentioned Katrina, but a lot of those neighborhoods, and we saw this when Hurricane Sandy hit in New York, people pulled together. The thing is, the guy that had the generator, the guy that had firewood for his fireplace, the guy that, had an outdoor grill and could cook for his neighbors became the hero because he was there to provide something that the others had overlooked.
Right. On that note, I think that's a great place to wrap it up.
I do too.
Nicely done. Now, best way to get a hold of you?
I'd like you to please check out my website, www.peregrinesafeandready.com. I'd like you to like me on Facebook when you also go in and like Genesee Sun on Facebook. And you can call my cell phone, which is my business phone. It's area code 585-447-0357.
All right, folks, have a good one. I'll see you in 90 days. Fred will be back here next week with Christian. Have a good one.
Bye.